Welcome to Scary Stories. We've got a special for you tonight that runs over 2 hours, but I wanted to first give you some previews of the new episodes coming up at the end of July going into August. There are a number of werewolf transformation stories in the works, including both male and female werewolves. We've also got Dogman stories peppered in, and some that I'm not really sure about. They might be werewolf stories or they might be sightings of the Midwest Dogman. I just can't say for sure. All these images you're seeing are from upcoming episodes. But now it's time for tonight's episode, and I think we should kick it all off with this one here, which we call The Dogman That Chased Me Home. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I just moved into my new home last month. I was really enjoying myself up until last night, when the Dogman chased me home. Last night was oh so scary. I was sitting in my old car, alone in the pitch black darkness, waiting for the red light to turn green. It was a hot night, but for some reason I was feeling chills. Suddenly out of nowhere appeared a creature. It stood on 2 legs like a man, but its face, its face, it resembled a vicious dog. My heart pounded faster than the fastest race car. Fear took control of my thoughts, clouding my mind with terror. The beast stared me down, those glowing eyes piercing into my soul. Its sharp teeth, bared and ready to bite, sent shivers down my spine. In my panic, I hit the gas, desperate to escape this nightmare. With tires screeching and engines roaring, I sped away, leaving behind the terrifying creature. But oh no, it wasn't done with me just yet. Behind my car it chased, its footsteps thumping louder than a marching band. Sweat poured down my forehead, blurring my vision. My breath hitched. My lungs felt tight. Panic erupted inside me, like fireworks on the 4th of July. My home, only a few breathless moments away, seemed impossibly far. I slammed the brakes on the sidewalk in front of the house, and as I ran to the front door, trembling like a leaf in a storm, the Dogman drew closer. Its growls echoed through the night, drowning out all rational thought. With the key shaking in my hand, I fumbled to unlock the door. Finally, I swung it open and stumbled inside, slamming it shut with all my strength. Sweat soaked my entire body, my clothes clinging to me like a wet blanket. I was safe for now, but the memory of that creature is gonna haunt me forever. Today I sit and recount the horrors of last night, and I'm remembered of the primal fear that lurks within us all. The Dogman is an unfathomable creature, and it shattered my peaceful existence, forcing me to face the fragility of my own mortality. Now I realize I am not even safe in my own home, and that the Dogman can return at any moment. I have negotiated peace with all cryptids. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I am very excited to send you this package of materials concerning the peace I have personally negotiated between humanity and Bigfoot. The Sasquatch peoples in turn claim to speak on behalf of all intelligent cryptids, and as long as the terms of this deal are upheld by our side, we can look forward to a permanent cessation of all abduction and consumption of humans by American man-eating cryptids, at least under most circumstances. Included you will find our press release, the entry from my journal written immediately after the treaty was signed, and the true story of how Chief Thunderfoot and I met in the first place. Here is the actual journal entry I wrote down by hand on the most historic day of my life, July 7th, 2023, the day when the treaty itself was approved and signed. Journal entry, July 7th, 2023. Today, history has been made. I find myself both humbled and exhilarated as I sit here pen in hand to record the extraordinary events that unfolded before my eyes. For years I have ventured deep into the heart of untamed wilderness, where legends and hushed whispers of the elusive Bigfoot tribes have echoed through the trees. Little did I know that my mission would lead me to negotiate a peace deal between our two species. As the sun began its descent, casting long shadows across the dense forest, I found myself face to face with their leader, the renowned Chief Thunderfoot. Towering over me, he radiated wisdom and strength, his rugged features softened by an air of indescribable tranquility. In awe of the moment, I stumbled upon my words, knowing that the weight of what I said might shape the destiny of both our species. In halting breaths, I began weaving a narrative of understanding, bridging the vast divide between our worlds. I spoke of the countless misunderstandings, the fear-driven folklore that led humans to perceive them as threats. With an earnest heart, I emphasized our shared desires for peace, for mutual respect, and unity among our diverse races. This was not an easy task. Guiding perceptions to look beyond differences takes time, it takes deliberation, and it takes patience. Yet with every word, I saw recognition flicker in the chief's intelligent eyes. His deep voice resonated with a timbre that bespoke his wisdom, as he recounted ancient tales of Bigfoot tribes, yearning to coexist peacefully with humanity for centuries. Then a moment of truth arrived. With trembling hands and my heart pounding in my chest, I proposed a monumental concept, granting the Sasquatch people full human rights. I anticipated resistance, but Chief Thunderfoot paused, contemplating our species' shared future. In a deep, resolute voice that echoed through the forest, he acknowledged the legitimacy of our proposal. The chief's gesture spoke volumes, a pivotal shift in the course of history, unfolding before our very eyes. In return for the Sasquatch tribes being recognized as equals and accorded human rights, Chief Thunderfoot extended his massive hand in a ceremonial gesture, bearing a sacred oath. With unwavering resolve, he promised that no longer would his people abduct or consume humans, forever relinquishing the dark veil of fear that had long haunted our nightmares. A profound silence enveloped the glen, as if nature herself held her breath, witnessing this unprecedented accord. In that suspended moment, I realized the magnitude of what we had achieved. A bond formed between our dissonant worlds, destined to foster a harmonious future. As I slowly made my way back to the human world, a profound sense of joy and optimism infused my very being. With this peace agreement, I carry within me a beacon of hope that our collective journey to understanding and acceptance will inspire the world. The era of mistrust and animosity seems distant now, replaced by the potential for unity and harmony between humankind and the Sasquatch people. I dream that one day soon I may witness a world where our children stand side by side, where the legends of the past become the tales of our shared history, and where the boundaries we once deemed insurmountable fade into oblivion. And it all began today, with a single man, a vision of peace, and the enduring spirit of the Bigfoot tribes. Together we will forever change the course of humanity, embracing the diversity that makes us truly extraordinary. Well, that's the end of my journal entry. Next, I got on Facebook to alert my over 300 followers with this post. Breaking news. Historic treaty agreement reached with Chief Thunderfoot of the Sasquatch people. Hey everyone, I am absolutely thrilled to share the most incredible news that our world has witnessed in recent times. Today I had the unique privilege of being part of a historic moment with Chief Thunderfoot of the Sasquatch people. We have successfully formulated a groundbreaking treaty agreement that will shape the future of our coexistence with the legendary beings known as Bigfoot. After months of intense negotiations and mutual understanding, I am proud to announce that the Sohum Treaty has been established to safeguard the rights and safety of both humans and Bigfoot. This momentous accord is built upon a core promise: an end to Bigfoot consuming humans, in exchange for granting them fundamental human rights, the fundamental human rights that they deserve. This extraordinary event signifies a leap forward in the journey toward harmony between our two societies. We must recognize that the Sasquatch people have long endured the struggles of being misunderstood, marginalized, and often feared by us humans. But through meaningful dialogue and shared empathy, we have laid the foundation for mutual respect and peaceful cohabitation. I can't express enough how impressed I am by Chief Thunderfoot's wisdom, strength, and commitment to uniting our communities. The Chief's leadership and genuine desire to bridge the gap between our worlds have been truly inspiring. It is an honor to have worked alongside him, fostering trust and ensuring that our shared goals are met. Moving forward, this historic agreement will allow Bigfoot to embrace the basic human rights that they have long yearned for. Their right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness will be protected, without infringing upon the rights and safety of the human population. Our governments will work together to develop educational programs that promote understanding and respect for both Bigfoot and humans. It's important to acknowledge that this treaty is just the beginning of a transformative era for our societies. Change takes time, and it is our collective responsibility to foster tolerance, empathy, and harmony in our shared spaces. Let us remember that we are all inhabitants of this beautiful planet, and together, we can build bridges that unite us, rather than walls that divide us. As we celebrate this historic milestone, I want to extend my deepest gratitude to Chief Thunderfoot and the Sasquatch people for this courageous leap of faith. It is my hope that the Sohum Treaty will serve as a shining example of how we can live together, respecting one another's differences and finding common ground for a brighter future. So, I know your channel is called Scary Stories, and I'd like to tell you the actual story of how this all came to take place. Well, that story goes back to the end of the last century, when all this began. August 1997, a pivotal month in my life, marked the beginning of an extraordinary journey. I ventured deep into the enchanting woods of Northern California. I had always been fascinated by stories of the supernatural, the unexplained, and the creatures that lurked in the darkness. But nothing could have prepared me for what I was about to experience, an encounter that would shake the very foundations of my belief system. It was a dark, windy night, the moon high in the sky, casting an ethereal glow upon the forest. I had ventured deep into the heart of the Pacific Northwest, drawn by the ancient tales surrounding this mysterious wilderness. The wind whispered among the trees, creating an eerie symphony of rustling leaves and distant howls. Unease settled upon me like a heavy blanket. As I cautiously made my way through the dense undergrowth, a sense of being watched consumed me, Paranoia gripped my every thought, my imagination running wild. The dense fog added to the heightened sense of fear, obscuring my vision, and plunging me into a world of shadows and uncertainty. Suddenly a low growl broke the silence, freezing me in my tracks. My heart pounded, threatening to burst from my chest. I could feel the primal terror clawing at the edges of my sanity. Slowly I turned around, and there it stood, an immense figure, towering at least 8 feet tall. Its long matted fur clung to its muscular frame, its eyes glinting with an intelligence I did not expect to find. The creature, a Sasquatch, as ancient folklore would dictate, was unlike anything I had ever seen before. Fear and awe waged war within me, rendering me incapable of movement or speech. Its distinct, pungent odor filled the air, forcing me to cover my nose and my mouth with trembling hands. To my astonishment, the Sasquatch began to speak, a deep, rumbling voice that resonated throughout the forest like thunder. "Do not fear me, human," it intoned, its eyes piercing into my very soul, "for I wish to discuss a matter of great importance." Confusion replaced fear, and I found my voice again. "What is it that you want?" I stammered, my words barely audible. The creature's face softened, a hint of sorrow sculpted onto its rugged features. "Peace, human," it replied. "The time has come for my people and humanity to find a way to exist in harmony." I began to comprehend the gravity of this revelation, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to bridge the gap between two worlds. "How can this be achieved?" I asked, my voice trembling with anticipation. The Sasquatch hesitated, its immense frame swaying with contemplation. "We have watched your species. We have seen the destruction and the chaos brought upon the earth by you. It is time for humanity to awaken to the consequences of its actions." A wave of humility swept over me as I realized the truth in its words. The Sasquatch, a guardian of the forest, was extending an olive branch. "We offer knowledge, guidance, and an alliance," the Sasquatch continued. "But it's up to humanity to open its collective heart, to listen, and to make amends." Tears welled up in my eyes as hope blossomed within me. This encounter was not only an encounter with the supernatural, it was a turning point for humanity itself. The Sasquatch had initiated a dialogue, a call for unity and understanding. As I bid farewell to the majestic creature, promising to share its message, I ventured back into the human world with renewed purpose, the weight of responsibility resting heavily on my shoulders. However, I knew that the future of our world could be forever altered by this encounter. The Sasquatch had shown me that even in the darkest of times, a glimmer of hope can spark a revolution that begins with the simple idea of peace. We're up here in 7th Heaven. We got a super thanks from Philo2077. Please join me in thanking Philo2077 for making this episode possible. They sent us a super thanks by using that thanks button under each of our YouTube videos, with advertising rates dropping to a fraction of what they once were. We're certainly feeling the squeeze here at Scary Stories, so we really do appreciate anything you guys can do to help. We really do. Werewolf Businessmen in 2023. Dear Scary Stories, I always knew business was a ruthless battleground, a field where only the strongest and most cunning could survive. Little did I know that the cutthroat nature of my industry would pale in comparison to the unexpected pressure that I would encounter outside the boardroom. It seemed as though fate had a twisted sense of humor, pushing me down a path I never anticipated, becoming a werewolf. It all began at an exasperatingly ordinary business conference, where colleagues exchanged pleasantries, indulged in small talk, and competed for lucrative contracts. Everything seemed familiar until whispers about a particular trend started circulating among the networking crowd. At first I dismissed them as nothing more than idle gossip, born out of boredom and a desperate desire for individuality in a field that thrived on conformity. But as days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months, those whispers grew louder, even more insistent. Friends, acquaintances, and competitors alike were adopting this eerie transformation, claiming that it gave their companies an edge, enhancing their abilities, amplifying their senses, and revolutionizing their approach to business. The notion of becoming a werewolf for professional pursuits became a highly sought-after secret society, an exclusive club that promised prosperity and power. Despite my skepticism, the pressure to conform grew exponentially. It seemed that everyone around me was succumbing to the allure of the paranormal, their once human bodies transforming under the illuminated moon. Colleagues I had once respected, individuals I had deemed rational, were now swapping their tailored suits for tattered shorts, their polished shoes for their own barefoot clawed feet. Each day the pressure mounted more and more on me, creeping like a determined shadow that refused to be ignored. Subtle suggestions transformed into relentless demands, disguised as harmless reminders that associating with wolves would forge a stronger relationship with potential clients. My objections fell on deaf ears. Those who had already embraced their lupine selves had become fierce evangelists, preaching their newfound power, success, and dominance. Reluctantly, I decided to succumb to the coercion, driven by fear of losing my competitive edge, rather than any true belief in the paranormal. The night of my transformation approached, with a mix of trepidation and anticipation. Would this metamorphosis truly unleash a latent potential within me, or was I simply allowing myself to be seduced by an absurd trend, obfuscating the realities of business acumen? As the full moon loomed large in the night sky, a sense of inevitability settled upon me. I found myself in a secluded clearing, surrounded by those who had undergone the transformation before me. The air crackled with anticipation, the scent of nervous sweat mingling with an undercurrent of excitement. The leader of our group made an impassioned speech, which seemed to be directed partially into the ground, with the rest shouted at the sky above. I understood most of the words he was speaking, but I failed to comprehend the meaning of what he was saying. I was wondering if he was even making any sense at all, when I suddenly saw each and every one of the people in the circle around me begin to change. None of us were wearing clothing, so I could see with my own eyes that their bodies were becoming different, and I could hear their wails and moans of extreme pain, but also a kind of transcendent bliss at the same time. Like a pain they had all grown to associate with positive things. Like the way my mother explained her smoking habit to me. It made her cough and get sick the first time she tried it. But now, why now she'd mastered it, and it had become the most pleasurable thing in her day. This was like that. I could hear their bones popping, and some of the younger ones did scream in utter torment when that would happen. The more experienced werewolves, though, the ones who had been transforming longer, why, they seemed to enjoy the pain. No, they seemed to luxuriate in it, to revel in it, to roll in ecstasy inside the pain. I found this all very off-putting, and I wanted to run. I was surrounded by mutating post-humans, though, and so I held perfectly still, observing the pure horror in every direction. When the dust started to settle, and in this case I mean the term in a literal way, I found myself looking at a bunch of hairy, former people with dog ears of various types, dog noses of various lengths and colors, and really scary fangs and claws. The claws looked natural on Susie from accounting. She always had the longest nails in the company. But the rest of them? Man, they looked like they were going to slice themselves up accidentally, more than they were going to harm any other living creature in those woods. And then, it happened to me. Bones shifted, muscles twisted, and fur sprouted from every pore. The pain was indescribable, as if my very being rebelled against this unnatural transformation. I struggled to cling onto my reason, fighting against my own despair that whispered to me, asking me, "What have you done?" It's been months since that fateful night, and my life has been irrevocably changed. I am now a businessman by day, and a werewolf after that, navigating a professional landscape interwoven with rituals, furry alliances, and an unspoken code of supernatural ethics. The same aggression that once drove my success has taken on a literal form, and my heightened senses now prey upon opportunities that might have remained hidden before. But deep within, I question whether this trend truly signifies strength, or if it reflects an alarming erosion of human values. In a world marked by ambition and fierce competition, have we become so desperate for an edge that we're now willing to redefine our very nature? Though the allure of power still beckons, I bear the burden of knowing that the wolfen persona I now embody may be a reflection of our collective fears, desires, and moral compromises. Perhaps one day I will summon the courage to break free from this trend and reclaim the humanity I feel slipping away with every rising moon. Until then, though, I am an unwilling participant in this growing phenomenon, an unorthodox businessman searching for purpose amidst the shadows of our predatory world. My ex-wife and I have become friends again recently because she is experiencing similar troubles at her job. She wrote this next part for me to send to you anonymously. This is in the words of my ex-wife. I never thought my marketing career would lead me down such a bizarre path. As a woman working for a company that I'd rather not name, I've always prided myself on being well-versed in the latest industry trends, using innovative strategies to promote our products. But lately I found myself caught up in a twisted phenomenon that I never could have predicted. The alarming trend of being pressured into becoming a werewolf. It all started innocently enough. Our company had been struggling with marketing campaigns that lacked a certain edge, failing to captivate the ever-changing consumer base. Sensing desperation in the air, our upper management began brainstorming unconventional ways to garner attention. And that's when we stumbled upon the supernatural. Suddenly, werewolves became the talk of our office. The initial idea was to tap into their mystique, their raw power and allure, and use it to amplify our brand image. I mean, at first it seemed like a whimsical notion, something to inject a little excitement into our daily grind. But as time went on, it became clear that management's fascination with werewolves was more than just a passing trend. It was a twisted obsession, an obsession that trickled down to all of us. The pressure to conform was insidious. Co-workers began whispering about secret moonlit gatherings, murmuring subtly about the increased effectiveness of their marketing pitches once they had joined the pack. They told me about how their senses had sharpened, how their heightened instincts granted them an unparalleled understanding of consumer behavior. And if I'm being honest, it did pique my curiosity. But I refused to give in to the pressure. I believed there had to be other ways to excel in marketing without resorting to lycanthropy. I sought solace in my creativity, trying to devise compelling campaigns rooted in imagination, rather than transformations under a full moon. Yet with each passing day, I found myself feeling more and more like an outsider, an outcast in a world being consumed by werewolf mania. Eventually, the relentless persistence of my colleagues wore me down. Believing it was the only way to succeed in this increasingly bizarre landscape, I reluctantly agreed to undergo the transformation. It was a decision fueled by desperation and the fear of being left behind. A decision I would come to rue. The process was excruciating, both physically and emotionally. The moon called to me, and as the curse took hold, I found myself grappling with an insatiable hunger that could only be satiated by the wild hunt. I questioned whether I had sold my soul to a corporate-driven nightmare, sacrificing my humanity for the sake of marketing prowess. The more I delved into my new werewolf existence, the more apparent it became that I was not alone. Others, caught in the same web of expectations and irrational desires, had succumbed to the allure of this growing trend. The office transformed into a makeshift pack, driven by competitive instincts, and a collective belief that our newfound gifts would lead to success. But there I found myself, standing at the precipice of self-reflection and realization. This trend, this twisted fascination with becoming a werewolf, it is not the path to true success. It is a trap, a cycle of conformity that erases one's uniqueness and humanity. As I set out to break free from this suffocating cycle, I come to understand that real passion and creativity in marketing lie within ourselves, not in the supernatural. I refused to let this experience define me, vowing to once again champion innovative ideas that resonated with consumers without losing sight of my own identity. So I sent out feelers to see who might be interested in working with me if I started my own new firm. At first, I got a number of interested responses, but when they learned that I was going to be trying my best to undo the werewolf curse and attempt to return to being a normal human, then it was like a wall went up between me and all my best contacts. I haven't even found a way to quit being a werewolf. I've only heard rumors about how to do it. But just because I talked about wanting to try to run my new firm by employing regular non-werewolf people, just that was enough to get me cut off from the entire pack. I was fired from my job, and I spent almost half a year out of work. I eventually had to take an assistant job, but I have 10 years experience as a manager. My boss has me do all the work, and she takes all the credit. I can't ever be promoted here. It's a dead-end job, and yet nobody else is interested in hiring me at all. So now, not only am I still a werewolf, but I'm a broke one, who had to sell her car and move to a cheaper apartment where my new super hits on me and won't do repairs unless I smile and ask nicely. And even so, at night, I have to get myself to the woods and I have to run and hunt and kill and eat. But I no longer am allowed to run with the pack. I'm a lone wolf now, not really making it in either world any longer. I've gone from wanting to break free from this curse to hoping that the werewolves will forgive me and allow me a second chance. I am willing to take the low pay and long hours, but if I can't return to human form, then I need to be accepted by the pack. I find my individuality increasingly burdensome, and yet by living the solo life, I have no choice but to make my own decisions. I pray to either be able to become myself again, or else to fully accept my new form. Living in my current limbo is the ultimate torment. And that's how my ex-wife's piece ends. I have thought about trying to get her work at my firm, but it's not in her field. I truly can't say what lies ahead for her, or for me either. And now I have one more piece here, but I don't actually know the person who wrote this last one. This was sent to me by an acquaintance who claims that they know the author, but I am not certain that this individual even exists. Bear that in mind, because his or her claims here are rather extreme. I know everyone likes to pick on the advertising industry, but be forewarned that this next one goes to lengths I've never seen before. Still, I don't know anyone very well that works in that field, so I can't really say for sure about any of this. Maybe this was just written by someone who got fired by an advertising agency and has an axe to grind. I can't tell. With that caveat in place, I'd like to introduce this next little piece which alleges, without any hard evidence mind you, that werewolves are in the process of taking over advertising. If this is true, then I would expect to eventually find out at my work, but at this stage of the game, all I can do is conclude with this final opinion piece written supposedly by someone working in advertising in a major American city in the Midwest. And here is that piece now. I never thought being in the advertising industry would turn my life upside down the way it has. It all began, innocently enough, with the usual long hours, stressful deadlines, and high-pressure pitches. But then a sinister twist came into the equation. A warped trend that seemed to be engulfing the industry. A situation that transformed me into something I never thought possible. A werewolf. It all started one fateful evening, during an extravagant client event. The air was filled with champagne bubbles and the clinking of flutes, as everyone celebrated the latest successful campaign launch. Amid all the revelry, I found myself cornered by my boss, Mr. Harrington, a man notorious for his charismatic yet slightly disturbing demeanor. His voice rose above the chatter, his words laced with an eerie confidence. You know, Richard, in this business, we must always strive for something unique, something that sets us apart from the crowd. I nodded hesitantly, sensing an unusual air of importance in his words. Yes, Mr. Harrington, but what exactly do you mean? A wicked grin crept across his face before he leaned in close, his voice dropping to a whisper. Werewolves, Richard. Have you ever considered the power of a werewolf in advertising? Honestly, my mind couldn't even fully process what he was saying. It seemed absurd, ludicrous even. But before I could dismiss it as the ramblings of an eccentric boss, he continued. Think about it, Richard. Werewolves symbolize unleashed potential, raw instinct, and an uncontrollable force. We need that edge in our campaigns. That's something the market has never seen before. I believe you have what it takes to embody that power. To physically embody that power. I took a step back, my heart pounding with uncertainty. Was this man serious? And more importantly, was I willing to enter into his weird game? It was as if there were an underlying threat, a hidden coercion, compelling me to accept his proposition. Against my better judgment, I found myself agreeing, making a pact with the advertising devil. From that point on, my life was no longer my own. I was necessitated to indulge in strange rituals, whispered incantations, and to consume bizarre concoctions that promised to awaken the beast within. Days turned into sleepless nights as I cycled through a roller coaster of emotions. Fear mixed with excitement, dread blended with anticipation. I became a pawn in Mr. Harrington's grand scheme, and my life began spiraling into a dark abyss. And then, one full moon night, it happened. The transformation. As the moon's ethereal glow bathed the office in an eerie light, I felt my bones crack, my muscles convulse. Agonizing pain surged through every inch of my body as fur erupted from my pores. Sharp claws tore through my fingertips. The metamorphosis was complete. I had become a werewolf. In the beginning, I fought to control the beast within, fearing the consequences of losing myself completely. But soon, I started to notice something peculiar. The presence of other werewolves within the industry, each succumbing to the same pressure, the same sinister manipulation. It seemed as if the advertising world had become infested with these creatures, with every agency striving to unveil their own werewolf brand ambassador. The once exclusive club of werewolves now grew, infiltrating every corner of the industry. As the trend escalated, I couldn't help but question the darkness that had enveloped my life. Who was benefiting from this bizarre phenomenon? And why were we being pressured into embracing an uncontrollable alter ego for the sake of advertising campaigns? The answers remained elusive, lost in the labyrinth of manipulation and compromise. But one thing became clear. I had to break free from this dreadful curse, this forced transformation. I had to reclaim my identity, my humanity. So now, as I find myself standing on the precipice of change, I gather the shattered remnants of my life, piecing them together with newfound strength. With each passing day, I inch closer to revealing the truth, to dismantling the twisted trends that have infiltrated my industry. But until then, I remain haunted by the howls of my fellow werewolves, their existence a dark reminder of the choices that we were unjustly forced to make. Beware the allure of advertising, for sometimes things which look beautiful from a distance can conceal a sinister darkness. We've gotten so many donations from Tiffany, it's like listening to a sweet polyphony. Please join us in thanking Tiffany Walsh, a name we don't thank enough around here, because she's been quite kind to us for quite some time. Tiffany is a member in good standing, no great standing, no awesome standing of our PayPal subscribers club at peterbernard.com. That means she gets to see secret uncensored Dogman stories that the public doesn't get to see. The Alex the Werewolf Story. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I never imagined that my life would take such a wild turn. Growing up as the wealthy daughter of a rich family, I was always taught to stay within our societal boundaries. But sometimes life has a way of shattering your expectations and leading you in directions that you never thought possible. It all started for me one fateful night at a lavish charity event hosted by my parents. It was a pretty sophisticated event, but I was looking for something more exciting. As I navigated the sea of tailored suits and designer dresses, my eyes fell upon the most captivating figure I had ever seen. He exuded a raw energy, an untamed aura that intrigued and frightened me all at once. Captivated by this mysterious stranger, I found myself acting on an impulse I never thought I was capable of. With each stolen glance, my curiosity grew stronger, urging me to uncover the secrets behind those piercing amber eyes. So I set off on a clandestine mission to explore the forbidden world he inhabited, a world I knew my family would never approve of. That evening, beneath the pale moonlight, I ventured into the underbelly of the city, a place where wealth and privilege held no sway. Rusty street lamps cast an eerie glow, illuminating the gritty reality that my life had shielded me from. With each step, anonymity granted me newfound liberation, as if I were an actress stepping onto an elaborate, yet treacherous stage. Then at the heart of it, I found him. The enigma that had consumed my every thought. His name was Alex, a name so simple, yet hiding a complexity that left me spellbound. In his presence, I felt a mixture of unease and awe. There was an intensity to him, a primal energy that made my heart race, and my palms clammy. It took some time for him to open up, as if afraid that his true nature would drive me away. But as the weeks turned into months, the trust between us deepened, and I came to understand the duality of his life. Alex carries a burden few can comprehend, the affliction of being a werewolf. I witnessed the pain that he endured as the full moon thrust him into a world of savage instincts and unbridled desires. But even in his darkest moments, he never lost his humanity. It was this resilience and innate goodness that drew me closer to him, eroding the barriers between our worlds. Our secret rendezvous became the anchor in a turbulent sea of expectations and privilege. In his arms I found solace, an escape from the suffocating pressure of conformity. With him, life became an exhilarating journey, a dance between moonlit nights and stolen kisses beneath starry skies. But our forbidden love always weighed heavy on our hearts. We knew that the divide between us could never truly be crossed, at least not within the rigid boundaries set by society. The world deemed us incompatible, our love an anomaly too great to withstand the scrutinizing eyes of our families. Now, as I sit in the opulence of my gilded bedroom, surrounded by superficial extravagance, I can't help but yearn for a life less constrained. A life where love knows no bounds, where societal prejudices surrender to the bonds of the heart. The complexities of our passion may forever be confined to hidden corners of the night, but that's the time that is shaping the person I am becoming. So as the moon rises at night, I dream of Alex and the love I've found in the depths of darkness. I remember the special night when Alex first wanted me to see his transformation, his metamorphosis into the werewolf. I sat cross-legged on the threadbare carpet of his small studio apartment, my anxious gaze fixated on him. Beads of sweat adorned his forehead, his features strained with an impending torment. The air grew heavy with a tangible tension, making it difficult to draw in a breath. As the first twinges of pain began to haunt him, a low growl escaped his clenched teeth, reverberating through the confines of the room. I watched, my heart wrenching with both fear and an unwavering love, as his muscles contorted and twisted, reshaping his once human frame. It was an agonizing process. Bones shifted, elongated, and reassembled themselves, accompanied by gut-wrenching snaps and pops. The dance of agony and transformation was as mesmerizing as it was terrifying. With each passing moment, Alex became less human and more beast. A chorus of howls and whimpers tore through the night, merging with the sound of my racing pulse. The scent of fur, earth, and an undeniable wildness filled the room, mingling with my senses, intoxicating me. His hands, now clawed and muscular, raked the wooden floor, leaving deep grooves in their wake. And in that moment of brutal metamorphosis, I marveled at Alex's continued strength. Despite the unrelenting pain coursing through his veins, his eyes never lost their warmth. His heart never lost its tenderness. It was as if the essence of who he truly was, a kind-hearted, compassionate soul, was unbreakable, even in the throes of this monstrous shift. Finally, as the moon reached its zenith, he completed his transformation. Standing before me was a majestic creature, dark fur glistening under the moonlight, eyes glinting with a mixture of untamed instincts and lingering humanity. He let out a mournful, triumphant howl, a proclamation of his existence and his acceptance of this fate. As his eyes locked with mine, I could feel the connection between us grow stronger. In his beastly form, he was still Alex, still the being I had come to love so ardently. The dichotomy of his wolfish exterior and his gentle, soulful interior combined in a captivating dance, echoing the complexities of our forbidden love. But it was in that moment that the reality of our predicament fully sank in. The world would never accept the beauty and fierceness of our connection. We were bound by secrecy, forever hidden within the shadows of society, where we could only find solace in the stolen moments and secret embraces. Despite the pain, the obstacles, and the ever-present threat lurking in the shadows, our love grew stronger with each passing metamorphosis. And in the stillness of the night, as I brushed his velvety fur with trembling hands, I knew that, no matter the sacrifices, I was willing to endure the excruciating beauty of his transformation. For love knows no bounds, not even the boundaries imposed by a man turned wolf. The morning after witnessing Alex's transformation, I found myself immersed in a sense of reverie, still overwhelmed by the intensity of the previous night. But the respite was short-lived, as the weight of my secret relationship with a working-class werewolf loomed over me, like an impending storm. As the sun cast its golden glow through the expansive windows of my lavishly decorated bedroom, I sat perched on the edge of my soft, indulgent bed. It was then that my father, a stern figure of authority, entered the room, with a grave expression etched upon his face.
"Darling,"
he began, his voice tinged with both concern and frustration.
"we need to talk about this relationship of yours."
I swallowed hard, the reality crashing upon me like a tidal wave. This was the moment I had been dreading. I had always known that my family was steeped in wealth for generations, and that they would never accept someone like Alex into their meticulously crafted world, let alone a werewolf from the wrong side of the tracks.
"I've observed your recent behavior, your absences, your distractions,
My father continued, his voice filled with disappointment.
and I cannot turn a blind eye to the path you're treading upon. You come from a world of privilege, and it's expected that you conduct yourself accordingly."
My heart sank, the weight of his words crushing my spirit. I had grown up in a bubble, shielded from the harsh realities of life. My father's words were a cold, hard reminder that our worlds were not meant to collide, that even the deepest love couldn't bridge the chasm between our social classes.
"But Daddy,
I pleaded, my voice laced with desperation.
you don't understand. Alex, he's different. He's not defined by his circumstances or his affliction.
His eyes bore into mine, searching for any trace of defiance.
It isn't about his character, my dear, but rather the complications and expectations that come with his existence. We live in a society shaped by rules and expectations, and we must abide by them.
I fought back tears, my mind racing with a mixture of anger and resignation. How could I explain the magnetic force that connected me to Alex, the genuine happiness I felt in his presence, when my father's eyes could only see the superficial barriers that society had erected? I whispered, my voice shaking.
Daddy, love knows no boundaries. It defies class and societal constructs. I can't define what I feel, no matter the consequences.
His expression softened with an evident struggle. He paused, his gaze a mix of love and concern, a father grappling with his own fears and protective instincts.
I understand that your heart is drawn to him,
he admitted, his voice finally taking on a gentle tone.
But my obligation as your father is to protect you and ensure your happiness. I fear that this path you've chosen will only bring you heartache and strife.
I nodded, tears streaming down my cheeks, silently acknowledging his fears, his perspective. I knew my father loved me, and that every protective instinct he possessed was born out of that love. Still, it was a love that did not understand the complexities of my connection with Alex, nor the sacrifices I was willing to make for him. As my daddy left the room, a heavy silence settled upon me. I knew that the world I had once known, sheltered in luxury and privilege, would forever be tinged with the bittersweet longing for a love deemed forbidden. I took one last glance at the grandeur that surrounded me before making my decision, firm and unwavering, to fight for our love, no matter the odds. Because even as my father cautioned me against the perils of our relationship, I couldn't ignore the truth that coursed through my veins. Alex had opened my eyes to a world beyond materialistic boundaries, to a love that transcended societal expectations. And though the road ahead would be paved with challenges, we were determined to build a future where werewolves and the wealthy could coexist, a world where love truly knew no bounds. The Dogman and the Rich Girl. Dear Scary Stories NYC. As a self-centered rich girl, my life has always revolved around the latest fashion trends, extravagant parties, and indulging in the finer things. But there was one particular day that shattered my superficial cocoon, an experience that left me trembling and reevaluating my perspective. On that fateful day, I decided to escape the city's chaos and venture into the nearby woods, craving solitude. The crisp autumn air enveloped me as I wandered deeper into the unknown sanctuary. Dressed in designer hiking boots and a carefully styled athletic ensemble, I felt invincible, oblivious to the world beyond my own glamorous bubble. The farther I walked, the more I lost myself in the serenity of nature's embrace. However, that tranquility was abruptly shattered when a low growl pierced the silence. Panic seized my heart as I turned around to see an enormous dog standing just a few feet away, a beast whose gigantic presence devoured my confidence. The creature's eyes bore into mine, shining with an intensity that sent shivers down my spine. Its fur, a mix of shades resembling autumn leaves, stood on end, adding to the air of threat that I was feeling. Fear paralyzed my body, while my mind spun tales of this monstrous hound attacking me, ruining my perfectly put-together look. Desperate to escape, I sprinted away from the fearsome canine, my breath jagged and shallow. Yet no matter how fast I ran, its massive form loomed close behind. My heart pounded, my mind occupied with thoughts that the dog would rip into my flesh, and that would ruin everything. As the seconds turned into minutes, it felt like an eternity spent being pursued by this colossal beast. But then, unexpectedly, my flight came to an abrupt halt. Unable to go any further, I braced myself for the inevitable violent confrontation. I closed my eyes, preparing for the pain and the disarray. Moments ticked by, but instead of sharp teeth sinking into my skin, I felt a nudge against my leg. Tentatively, I opened my eyes to find the enormous creature nuzzling me, its tail wagging uncontrollably. My fear evaporated as quickly as a raindrop hitting a scorching pavement. The ferocious beast, which had struck terror into my heart, simply wanted to be petted and showered with slobbery kisses. I couldn't help but laugh at my own foolishness, at how mere appearances had blinded me from truly understanding the world around me. In that moment, I realized the superficiality of my entire existence. Everything was about image. I had been so absorbed in my own self-centeredness that I failed to embrace the simple joys that life had to offer, even in the most unexpected circumstances. That experience in the woods pierced through my ego and awakened something within me. I now understand that between every outward appearance, there lies a treasure chest of surprises. And so I continue on my journey, ever open to the wonders that life unveils, even if they come in the form of a giant, slobbery dog. The Valley Girl and the Dogman. OMG, you guys, this is like seriously one of the most terrifying things that has ever happened to me, and I just have to like dish all the deets. So hold on to your pumpkin spice lattes and listen up, because this is a like seriously chilling tale. Okay, so I live in this beautiful house in the hills surrounded by lush woods that are like totally perfect for wild adventures. So like one day I'm just like finishing up a yoga session in my backyard when I noticed this large figure lurking in the distance. Ugh, that's like all I need, right? At first I think it's just like some creepy guy trying to be all stealthy, but oh no, it's so much worse. As I approach, I catch a glimpse of its beady, bloodshot eyes peering through the dense foliage. And then, you guys, it stepped out from the shadows, and my perfectly contoured face goes as white as my designer handbag. This thing, and I am so not kidding, is like the biggest, scariest dogman I have ever seen in my life. Its fur is all matted and dirty, and it has these like razor-sharp teeth that could like totally bite my arm off in one bite. I try to make a run for it, but my sky-high stilettos make it nearly impossible to move without face-planting into the bushes. So I muster up all the bravery within my perfectly manicured nails, and I decide to like befriend this creature. So I cautiously take a little tiny minting step toward the dogman, and then 2 or 3 or 4 more just to make up the step of a like normal footstep, pretending not to be like absolutely terrified, you know? I put on my most dazzling smile and I like introduce myself because duh, even scary creatures need to know who they're messing with. Surprisingly, the dogman actually starts wagging its mangy tail. Can you believe it? I couldn't. As days go by, we like totally become BFFs, you guys. I bring it fancy doggy treats and give it like the trendiest bandanas to wear when we go on our walks through the woods. It turns out that underneath all that scariness is like a really sweet and misunderstood soul. Just like I said, yo. And then one fateful night, things take a seriously dark turn, and I'm like shaking in my Chanel boots, yo. I receive an urgent text from my girl squad saying they just spied the dogman tearing through a neighboring village. I'm like in complete shock. How could this cuddly creature turn into like a total beast, yo? My perfectly manicured nails tap quickly on my iPhone, trying to figure out a solution. In the end, I realized that sometimes even the scariest and most misunderstood creatures can't be tamed. I mean, it breaks my beautiful heart, but I decide it's time to end our friendship. So I gather all my courage, and I bid farewell to the Dogman, leaving behind a basket full of treats and a heartfelt note, hoping he can read English. Now I live in constant fear, knowing that the chilling beast still roams the woods behind my home. And whenever the moon is full, I can't help but imagine those bloodshot eyes watching me from a distance. It's like I'm stuck in my own personal horror movie, and there's like no escape, yo. So the moral of the story, you guys, is this. Don't be fooled by cute and cuddly appearances. Sometimes even in the world of glamorous designer trinkets and fancy outfits, true terror lurks just beyond your perfectly manicured backyard. Scary, right? Like you have no idea. Our EP is cool from head to toe. Of course, I'm talking about S.A. Rose. Please join me in thanking today's executive producer, S.A. Rose, for making this episode possible. S.A. Rose is a $7 member of our PayPal subscribers club, and you can join that too at peterbernard.com. I can't help what I kill. Dear Scary Stories, NYC. I was having that dream again. You know, the one where you're chasing a rabbit. What? You mean you don't have that dream? Oh, well, then you must not be a werewolf. I've always believed in fate, in the intricate web that connects people's lives, guiding us toward our destinies. But these days I find myself trapped in a dark and merciless curse. My name is Jonathan, and I am afflicted with lycanthropy. I woke up with a knot in my stomach, the undeniable sensation of unease coursing through my veins. The same familiar feeling that had plagued me for weeks, escalating day by day. I knew what was happening, and it terrified me to my core. I was turning into a werewolf. Every night, as the full moon inched closer, an inexplicable transformation lingered within me, growing stronger with each passing minute. It was a curse that I had obsessed over ever since I stumbled upon a mystical book hidden away in a dusty old bookstore on 13th Street. It was the summer of '89 when I uncovered that mysterious little book lost amidst the dusty shelves. Time seemed to stand still inside that bookstore as the world outside bustled with the chaos of modernity. The allure of the past had always intrigued me, and in that ancient tome, I found my key to unlock the secrets of a forgotten era. As I flipped through its fragile pages, my mind fluttered with excitement and curiosity. The book itself seemed untouched by time, its leather cover weathered and worn, sharing tales of sorcery and enchantment. I wasn't sure if any of them were real, but each spell held the promise of otherworldly powers, a ticket to a world beyond our own, a world where magic thrived and dreams were made manifest. I suspected it all wasn't really real, but it was written as though it were, and in those days, that was good enough for me. Without much thought, I purchased the book, my heart pounding with anticipation, as if the pages themselves held invisible forces ready to leap out and envelop me. Little did I know that within its series of incantations, nestled among those spells, lay a particular invocation to become a werewolf, a spell that I would dare to cast, oblivious to the inescapable consequences. I enjoyed the book privately, not wanting to share even the awareness of its existence with anyone I knew. I don't feel that people are generally to be trusted with power, and I was beginning to suspect that this book had genuine power within it. The words inside told me to read them aloud, while unclothed, under the light of the moon, in the woods. And I was still young enough in those days that I went ahead and did exactly that. Moonlit nights soon became my temporal playground, where I found solace beneath the glow of the celestial orb that my life was beginning to revolve around. With each passing evening, my spirit tingled more and more, from the inside out, as if a wild beast stirred within me, yearning to break free from the confines of humanity. And so it happened. On a fateful evening lit by a silver-bathed moon, I recited the ancient words from that forgotten book of magic. The words danced off my tongue, carrying a power I hadn't comprehended. For a fleeting moment, I felt the air around me shift, as though nature herself were acknowledging the existence of the spell. As the final syllable escaped my lips, a surge of energy coursed through my veins, transforming my world into a whirlwind of sensation. Bones cracked, muscles contorted, and a darkness consumed my vision. The transformation was swift and merciless. I had unwittingly delivered myself into the clutches of a curse. I had deliberately become a werewolf. The nights that followed were filled with an uncontrollable appetite for the chase. The moon's call seeped deep into my bones, a siren's song that defied all reason. I watched helplessly as the beast within me, born of ancient magic, took over my body under the ever-watchful gaze of the goddess Luna. I spent years seeking a remedy to undo the spell, poring over countless tomes and consulting hermit-like sages who possess knowledge of the arcane. But the curse remains unbroken to this day, stubbornly intertwined with my existence. It became evident that I was fated to live this dual life, part man and part not. Regret echoes through my memories as I reminisce about that fateful day in the bookstore, about the folly of my youthful impetuosity. But as the years passed, a strange acceptance settled within me, and I realized that the werewolf and I are forever entwined. I've learned to embrace this duality, to dance between humanity and the night. So here I stand, a man burdened with a secret, forever ruled by the waxing and waning of the moon. The book that granted me this affliction remains a haunting reminder of my youthful naivete. Now my existence itself has become a testament to the power of ancient magic, as well as to the fact that some enchantments cannot be reversed, and some choices have irreversible consequences. Foolishly, I had unlocked the secrets of the book's pages, and now I was paying the price. Over the decades, I had built up an emergency bug-out routine in order to get as far from the humans as I could before the change took place. If I changed when I was in civilization, that meant someone wouldn't wake up the next morning. I learned that horrific fact the hard way. But fortunately, I lived 3 blocks from the woods, in an urban part of town. It was very run down, but I was lucky to even afford that. I knew that if I lost that apartment, it was back to looking for a cave in the woods to sleep in. One that's not already occupied by another dog-headed man, I mean. This is Michigan, after all. With beads of sweat forming on my brow, I rummaged through my belongings, collecting the essentials: a bag filled with clothes, a makeshift weapon, and my map of the nearby woods. My only chance at surviving the night without anyone getting hurt was escaping to the forest before the night fell upon the unsuspecting town. My heart raced as I sprinted through the dimly lit streets, the full moon looming ominously above. I knew time was running out, and each minute that ticked by felt like a second. But fate, relentlessly toying with me, seemed determined to prevent my escape. First, a common commotion brought the entire town to a standstill. Then a stray dog darted across the road in front of me, causing me to skid to a halt to avoid a collision. Impatience clawed at my chest, but I knew I couldn't afford to attract attention. I waited in silence, knowing that my ordeal was only beginning. As soon as I could resume my frantic pace, an abrupt downpour erupted from the heavens. Heavy rain soaked my clothes, plastering them to my body and obscuring my vision. I was alone, water weighing me down, yet that wasn't my biggest concern. With every soaking step, my transformation seemed to inch closer, despite my desperate attempt to outrun it. A blinding flash of lightning accompanied by a deafening thunderclap surprised me and caused me to stumble, narrowly avoiding a collision with a lamppost. My heart pounded in my ears, drowned out only by the relentless rain pummeling the earth. The storm raged on, but I couldn't afford to hesitate any longer. Finally, I reached the outskirts of town, the edge of civilization. My legs burned. My lungs ached. The relief washed over me. I was so close to surviving, to making those woods. But fate, relentless as ever, had one final twist in store for me. As I rounded a corner, panting heavily, I found myself running smack into a police officer. He was drenched in rain, gripping his baton tightly. Panic surged through my veins. I had run right into the arms of authority, right as the moon reached its zenith. "Calm down, son," the police officer said, weariness etched across his face. "You're not in any trouble, are you?" My words caught in my throat. My body trembled with the lunar energy coursing through me. In that moment, time seemed to slow, the world crystallizing around me. I could no longer fight it. The transformation overcame me, the pain tearing through my flesh as bones shattered and reformed. Right in front of the astonished police officer, I hunched over, my body convulsing with pain. The clothes I wore ripped apart, unable to withstand the emerging beast within me. Fur sprouted from every pore, muscles expanding and twisting until I stood before him as a fully formed wolfman. The policeman's eyes widened in terror and disbelief, his hand instinctively reaching for his gun. Yet, as his trembling fingers fumbled, paralyzed by fear, I turned my gaze toward the shadows of the woods. The primal instincts of my newfound form took over, and with one final glance, I sprinted out into the night. Leaving the officer behind, my howls became one with the sounds of the darkness. I was now a creature of the night, a predator, roaming free. The curse had consumed me, and as the full moon painted the sky with ethereal light, I embraced my existence as the embodiment of both man and beast. When I spoke to my brother about all this just last week, he kept asking me to tell him what it was like to end someone, the way I'm pretty certain I have done. The fact is that I don't remember anything like that. I usually black out when I'm no, that's not the correct way to put it. I'm fully conscious when I'm the creature and the same when I'm me, but I just don't really remember very much about the other when I'm changed. Like when I'm human, I don't remember very much about what happened the night before. At least, not usually, but it's weird. Like, you know how sometimes you wake up remembering your dream, but other times you don't remember if you even dreamed at all? It's kind of like that. The nights I do remember are usually the tedious ones. The ones where I see a nice big plump rabbit go into a hole, and then I sit there behind a bush for the entire night, waiting for it to come back out again so I can eat it. The nights when I actually succeed in catching something, well, those most often get blanked out from my memory, and I'm grateful for that. It seems that once I catch one living thing, whatever it may be, that drives up my bloodlust, and I grow increasingly more manic and dangerous throughout the rest of the night. There isn't anything I can do to stop it either. I can't help what I kill. I do it entirely out of instinct. When I am the wolf, I admit that there are some peaceful moments, but the majority of the time, I'm looking around for something that's moving, and then I try to stop it from moving anymore ever again. If I'm hungry, I'll eat, but if not, I'll still stop everything from moving anyway, just because that's the way I was programmed to behave. Programmed by the spell I moronically inflicted upon myself. Once upon a time, there was a woman, Emma. She possessed a heart pure and compassionate, a beacon of light that shone through the darkest of nights. Emma had always been my saving grace, a sanctuary for my tormented soul, but now I feared the very essence of my being would unleash a calamity upon her fragile life. In the beginning, our love story was like a mesmerizing melody, igniting our hearts with an overwhelming passion. Every touch, every caress, felt more intense under the moonlit sky. But as time passed, an undeniable darkness crept inside me, devouring everything in its path. The beast within me emerged during those cursed nights, when my body contorted and pulsated with unimaginable pain. My senses sharpened, and a primeval hunger possessed my very core. It was the hour of the wolf, and I was powerless against my lupine side. Terrified, I confided in Emma, baring my soul and revealing the horrors that haunted me. She listened intently, her eyes brimming with concern, her delicate hand gently resting on mine. Emma believed that she could save me, that love could conquer even the most monstrous of problems. But in this case, she was gravely mistaken. My transformations grew more violent with each passing moon, my humanity slipping between my gnarled claws. Dark memories plagued my mind, of blood-soaked nights where my feral instincts took control. How could I allow the woman I loved to be subjected to such terror? I pleaded with Emma, my voice trembling with desperation, urging her to abandon the fool's hope that she could ever cure me. I explained that my affliction was a self-inflicted curse, an inescapable prison. Her touch, so gentle and soothing, would only serve as a catalyst to awaken that monster inside me. But Emma, forever selfless, remained steadfast in her belief. She saw me not as a monster, but as a wounded soul, in need of salvation. Love is stronger than any darkness, she would say, with an unwavering determination. And though her words settled fondly in my heart, they held no sway over my cursed existence. I knew the depths of the atrocities I was capable of committing in my lupine form, the lives I could end, the innocence I could tear asunder. The mere idea of Emma, caught up in the violent grasp of my other side, caused a torment so profound that it eroded the last flicker of hope within me. So I pleaded once more, my voice laced with anguish, and anguish alone. "Stay away, Emma," I begged. "Stay away, before my werewolf side brings only ruin upon you." It was a plea born of love, of the desperation to protect her from the monstrosity that resided within my fractured soul. But Emma, stubbornly resilient, would not yield. Her eyes met mine, filled with unwavering resolve. "Jonathan, I will not abandon you," she said, her voice imbued with a strength I wished I could summon. "We'll face this curse together," she said, "arm in arm, until the very end." Her words struck me with a force I had never experienced, shattering the walls I had built around myself. Emma's unwavering love, her steadfast determination, had bridged the chasm between the man I once was and the monster I feared I was becoming. For the first time, I allowed a glimmer of hope to flicker deep within me. The two of us had some wine with our dinner, and toasted to the idea that we might have a future together. We danced and sang, and then collapsed into a chair, her on top of me, for a contented nap. But then, in my dream, I felt the changes overtaking me, and I woke up with a start, in great and severe pain and panic. I don't remember Emma being there at all. I only remember the terrible sensations that come when the transformation is already underway. I remember running from the apartment building and making my way to the woods, but I don't remember anything else until I woke up, sleeping high up on a branch in a tree, at dawn the next morning. I always wake up feeling incredible after being the werewolf. Sure, I have some muscle pains or cuts now and then, but there's an overall feeling of exhilaration the next morning as I wake up to greet the brand new day. And then I start to have to figure out how to climb down the tree that I apparently use claws to climb up into, and other issues like that. Almost immediately, I feel ashamed. If I have any clothing left on at all, it's always torn up in ridiculous ways. I'll be filthy, and sometimes covered in blood. The guilt starts creeping back in, too, as soon as I'm out of immediate danger. On that morning, I also had an extra concern. Had Emma been hurt the night before when I woke up in the process of the transformation? I hoped she had already gone to bed before that happened, but I literally couldn't remember clearly enough to know. This concern quickened my step on my way hiking out of the woods that morning, and my heart beat fast from more than just exertion. I couldn't wait to see Emma, so that I could hug her and tell her how important she was to me. But when I got home, there was nobody there. I didn't see any bloodstains or signs of violence, but I also didn't find Emma, and she didn't seem to have left a note if she went out. I freaked and called the police, shouting into the phone that my wife was missing after I only searched for her for maybe 20 minutes. Well, Emma was never found, and when one of the cops tipped me off that I was the main suspect, I beat it out of town into the woods, which is where I've lived ever since. If you can call this living, I'm not even sure I'd call it subsisting. But I'm alive at least. One thing about being a werewolf is that life is one long thrill ride. Except, when your loved ones go missing and you know it's somehow your own fault. That's not very thrilling at all. I no longer have plans. I no longer have goals. I just repeat the same patterns each day. Kill, eat, relieve myself, sleep, and repeat the process. Lately I've begun to have dreams of a lady werewolf. I wonder at this point if these are dreams of longing, or if those are partial memories of actual events, which happened while I was in the other form. For all I know, I have a family when I'm the monster. For all I know, the monster has more of a real life than I've ever had. For all I know, I may have a werewolf child. Now there's something to think about. So when you're having a bad day these days, try to remember, it could always be worse. You could have deliberately and idiotically given yourself lycanthropy. If you gauge by any metric, there is nobody greater than Matthew Frederick. Please join me in thanking Matthew Frederick for making this episode possible. Matthew is a member of our PayPal subscribers club, which you can join at peterbernard.com, and you get secret perks in return, like episodes that the public doesn't get to see. Welcome to a new volume of scary stories to fall asleep to. We've got all manner of scary bedtime stories here, but let's start out with a creepy canine tale first. And we call this one The Strange Dog-Headed Man. As I walked through the dark woods, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every snap of a twig, every rustle of leaves, sent shivers down my spine. I quickened my pace, hoping to make it home before anything could happen. But then I heard something that made my blood run cold. It was a low, guttural growl, like that of a wild animal. I turned around, and my heart stopped in my chest. There, standing in the shadows, was the figure of a man. But this was no ordinary man. His head was that of a snarling dog, teeth bared and eyes glowing in the darkness. He stood perfectly still, watching me, intently. I couldn't move. It was as if my feet were rooted to the spot. The dog-headed man took a step forward, and I could feel the hair on the back of my neck stand on end. I tried to run, but my legs felt heavy and uncooperative. As he closed in, I could smell the stench of wet fur and rotting meat. I couldn't move. It was as if my feet were rooted to the spot. The dog-headed man took a step forward, and I could feel the hair on the back of my neck stand on end. His growls grew louder, more menacing. I could practically feel his hot breath on my skin. I stumbled and fell to the ground, my heart racing in my chest. The dog-headed man towered over me, his eyes blazing with fury. He opened his mouth, a deep growl rumbling from deep within his chest. In that moment, I knew I was done for. But then, something miraculous happened. A ray of moonlight broke through the trees, casting a glow around the creature. His eyes softened, and he let out a mournful howl before turning and disappearing back into the darkness. What had I just witnessed? I can't tell you what that was that happened, but if it hadn't, I feel that the creature would have finished me off. I lay there for a moment, gasping for breath. It took me a few moments to gather myself and stand up. Somehow it didn't feel over, and to this day, it still doesn't feel as though it's concluded. With each step I took, I could still feel the weight of the dog-headed man's presence following me home, haunting me long into the night, and possibly for the rest of my life. The Antlered Man, outside my cabin. I had come to the Minnesota woods to escape the city and its commotion. The solitude and silence were everything I wanted, but there were times when it was almost overwhelming, especially at night, when the dark woods seemed to hold secrets that no one could know. During the day, I explored the forest, taking long walks and admiring the beauty of the wildlife and vegetation. One night, after a long day, I sat inside my cozy cabin, reading a book by the fire. I was feeling at peace with the world, when the sudden sound of rustling outside broke the stillness. I looked up from my book and I peered out the window, expecting to see a curious animal. Instead, I found myself staring at a creature with the body of a man and the antlers of a deer, rummaging through my woodpile. My heart leaped in my chest. The creature fixed me with cold, black, inhuman, unblinking eyes. As I watched, frozen, from behind the window, it snorted, then tossed aside a log, taking no further notice of me. The humanoid creature reached for another piece of firewood and studied it, examining it with skilled eyes. But what he was looking for, I do not know. It was then that I could see the creature's tall, slender build. Its arms were twisted, its joints contorted, in a way that made me cringe. For a moment, I thought about calling out to it, but the words died on my lips. The creature was not something I could communicate with or understand. Its movements were too inhuman, too alien. I felt a cold breeze, even though the cabin windows were all shut. The humanoid creature tossed the wood onto the woodpile, dropped to all fours, which looked unnatural given its humanoid build, then turned to go, starting away on all fours, the antlers bobbing up and down into the darkness. I waited until it was out of sight. Then I bolted the door and windows tight. For the rest of that night, I sat in the silent cabin, keeping vigil, wondering what other strange beasts might be lurking in the wilderness around me. I left the next morning, and since then, I take vacations in heavily populated areas. The Howling, in the basement. My husband and I rented a beautiful house in a small town. It wasn't long before we noticed that something was off. Sometimes, in the quiet of the night, we could hear a faint, mournful howling coming from our basement. At first we thought it was just the old house settling, or a passing car outside. But the howling didn't stop. It persisted, night after night, growing louder and more intense. It was a sound that seemed to emanate from deep within the basement of the house. One night, we decided to investigate. We made our way down to the cellar, following the sound of the howling. As we descended the stairs, the sound grew louder and more chilling until it was almost overwhelming. But when we reached the downstairs door to the basement, the howling abruptly stopped. We exchanged nervous glances, but slowly opened the door anyway. We peered inside the dark, musty basement, but there was no sign of anything out of the ordinary. Just a few old boxes of discarded belongings, some disused garden tools, and a furnace in the corner that rattled occasionally. After a few minutes of searching, we found nothing that could have caused the howling. We shrugged it off and returned to go upstairs to bed, but the howling started up again as soon as we started making our way back up. It was like the basement was hiding something deep and mysterious from us. The next few weeks were filled with restless nights. We stopped going down to the cellar and tried our best to ignore the howling. But it continued, and we started to worry that the house might be haunted by something sinister. In the end, we decided to move out, too spooked by the howling to stick around and find out what might be the source of it. We never did find out what was making that mournful sound, but to this day, it gives me chills just thinking about it. The man in my bathroom. I woke up with a start, feeling the urge to empty my bladder. The clock read 3 a.m. as I stumbled to the bathroom still half asleep. I quickly did my business in the dark and turned on the light to wash my hands when I saw him. A man, standing completely unmoving, facing the wall in my bathroom. His back was to me, and he seemed transfixed on a point on the wall. My heart raced as I took a step back, afraid to make any noise and alert him to my presence. I tried to rationalize what I was seeing, thinking that maybe it was someone who had gotten lost or confused, and had accidentally stumbled into my house. But then I noticed that there was something off about him. He was completely still, like a statue. I couldn't even see him breathing. I whispered, "Hello?" But he didn't respond. I didn't want to get any closer, so I slowly backed out of the bathroom. As I turned to walk back to my room, I swear I could feel his eyes on my back. But I couldn't bring myself to turn around and confirm that. I ran to my bedroom, and I locked the door behind me, feeling a cold sweat breaking out. I didn't know what to do. I picked up my phone to call the police, but for some reason, I thought they would call me crazy and hang up on me. So I just stayed there, listening to the sound of my own racing heart and the silence that had descended over the house. Eventually, the light began to peek through the blinds, and the morning birds began their song. I was hungry, and I needed to start my day, but I was too frightened to leave my room. The combination of sunlight and hunger made me braver. and I finally called the cops, waiting for them to arrive. When they got there, they searched the entire place, and there was no other person there besides me. I don't know what happened to the man in my bathroom, but I never forget the feeling of his presence. It was like whatever was in that bathroom that night had some kind of a power over me, and I never want to experience that again. My grandma's house seems to be haunted. My grandmother's house had always been a cozy haven for me. The scent of freshly made cookies, comfortable beds, and the sound of rain pattering against the windows made it a perfect refuge. As a child, I'd spend hours running around the house, peeking into every nook and cranny. But as I grew older, I began to notice something odd about the place. One late evening, I was staying in my grandmother's house alone, catching up on work I had brought with me. Everything was fine until I heard the sound of someone walking down the hallway, on the creaky wooden floor that I knew so well. I could hear footsteps approaching my room, but I couldn't see anyone through the partially open door. I assumed it was my grandmother and I called out to her, but when no one answered, I began to feel uneasy. I got up and walked toward the open door. I looked out into the hallway, and there was no one there. Shivering, I went back into my room and closed the door, not wanting to be out in the open where something could be lurking. It was then that I saw him, or rather his reflection, in the mirror. A young boy, covered in dirt, his eyes cold and lifeless. I couldn't scream. I couldn't move. I just stood there with my back pressed against the door, staring at that reflection. I knew that it was a ghost, and I knew that it was haunting my grandmother's house. The unease turned into full-fledged fear as I heard faint giggling coming from the darkness. Suddenly the room temperature dropped drastically, and I felt something brush against my arm. That was the moment I had to take action. I bolted out of that room, feet pounding on hardwood floor as I made my way toward the front door. It was unlocked, and I pushed it open, running out into the cold, dark night. When I looked back, the windows of the house were fogged up, and I could see the ghost of a young boy staring at me through the glass, watching me leave. I never went back to that house again. The memory of that night still sends shivers down my spine, and I wonder if the ghost of that young boy is still there, haunting my grandmother's house. The gnome who lived in our fireplace. My husband and I had just moved to an old stone cottage, and we were enamored with the roaring fireplace that worked so beautifully on cold autumn evenings. But we had one problem. We couldn't seem to keep the chimney clean. One evening, as we were struggling with yet another load of soot, we heard a tiny foul-mouthed voice coming from somewhere deep in the fireplace. We both froze, unable to believe what we were hearing. But the voice persisted, cursing and spitting out insults like a sailor. We tried to ignore it, telling each other that we had to be imagining it. But the voice continued, getting louder and more persistent with each passing day. Eventually, we realized that we were not alone in our cottage. When we found the thing urinating inside our refrigerator one day, it cursed a blue streak and ran back toward the fireplace, where I swear, with my own eyes, I saw him enter into a sliver between two stones and slide into a space far too small for him to have ever possibly fit. We both gasped at the sight of that, and we knew we were not in Kansas any longer. The two of us had a discussion about it, and our conclusion was that there was a foul-mouthed gnome living in an alternate dimension that he entered into through the stones of our old fireplace, and we got there using Occam's razor, too. This gnome was tiny, barely the size of a tennis ball, but he was more than a match for the two of us. He had a piercing voice that could make our ears bleed, and he could curse like no human being ever could. For weeks we tried to make peace with the gnome, to understand what he wanted and why he was there. But no matter what we did, that gnome only grew angrier and more vicious. He would hurl insults, threats, and curses at us all day and all night, completely unyielding. We contacted several so-called local paranormal experts, but nobody seemed to know how to deal with gnomes. Eventually, we decided that the only thing to do was to seal off the fireplace for good. It was a tough decision, but we knew we couldn't live with that gnome forever. So we filled it up with stones and cement, hoping the gnome would find somewhere else to live. But sometimes, on cold autumn nights, when the wind howls through the old walls of the cottage, we still hear the faint, foul-mouthed voice in the darkness, reminding us that the creepy, monstrous fellow will never completely leave this place. Are UFOs the afterlife? I was deep in my sleep when I felt something strange happening. It was the middle of the night, and I felt like I was being lifted off my bed, carried into the air by some unseen force. It couldn't have been a dream. This was too real. I tried to scream out, but my throat felt like it had been coated with sandpaper. I was terrified. When I opened my eyes, I was standing inside a strange room that glowed with a blue light. At first I thought I had been kidnapped, but the room was unlike anything I'd ever seen. It was like being on a spaceship from some sci-fi movie. In front of me stood two creatures that I could only describe as aliens. They were tall, thin figures with elongated arms and fingers. Their eyes were big and black, with no whites or pupils. They didn't look like anything I'd ever seen before. The aliens spoke to me, but I couldn't understand their language. I was filled with fear, wondering what they were going to do to me. I felt a surge of emotions that I had never experienced before. I felt loved, needed, and blessed, all at the same time. Then I looked around and I saw a shocking sight. Every person or pet in my life who had died was now alive again, and happy, standing there in that place with me, trying to get my attention. My grandparents, my parents, my beloved pets, they were all right there beside me, smiling and telling me they loved me and that they missed me. I was in shock to say the least. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I was overcome with joy and sadness all at once. I knew I was supposed to be happy, but my entire worldview was now turned upside down. When the aliens spoke now, I understood them easily. They explained to me that they had seen humans as a species that struggled with grief and regret. In their own words, they said, "We have come to help you see what might be possible if you could experience things outside your current perception." I was in a moral quandary. On the one hand, I was hesitant to accept such a gift. On the other hand, I couldn't stop seeing everyone I'd ever loved smiling back at me, so happy to see me. In the end, I knew I couldn't stay in that world forever. I had to return to my life, the life without them, to make new memories with everyone else who was still alive. I hugged each of those people I missed so badly, weeping uncontrollably, but knowing it had to be done. I said goodbye to each of them one more time, and thanked the aliens for their gift. They nodded, and that's all I remember. I woke up the next morning, unsure of what had happened to me the night before, but it was an experience I would never forget, one that reinforced my sense of the interconnectedness of all things, even across the vastness of space and the chasm lying between life and death. Some people tell me it was just a dream, but they can't feel how entirely changed my life has been since that incident. I know I will see those I've lost again, and that gives me a sense of peace as I try to do my best in life. Things feel like they make more sense to me since then, so if it was a dream, I say who cares? I wish this same dream on every one of you, so that you can know the peace that I feel since that night when the aliens reunited me with my loved ones. Incident on Clinton Road. As my boyfriend and I drove down the winding road of Clinton Road in New Jersey, I couldn't help but feel a sense of excitement mixed with fear. This notorious street was rumored to be one of the most haunted places in the country, and we were hoping to witness a ghostly encounter. The sky was dark, and the only source of light came from the car's headlights. As we drove deeper into the woods, the trees grew thicker, casting eerie shadows on the road. Suddenly we saw strange lights in the distance, hovering in the air. We were both stunned, unsure of what to do. Without warning, we were engulfed in a bright white light, and we both felt a strange sensation in our bodies. The next thing I knew, we were parked on the side of the road, with no memory of how we got there. The clock on the car's dashboard showed that 2 hours had passed, but we had no memory of what had happened during that time. Our hearts were racing with fear as we attempted to calm down and assess the situation. As we sat there, we heard strange whispers and saw ghostly apparitions hovering around the car. We were both paralyzed with fear, unable to move or speak. Suddenly, the car's engine started to rumble, and we felt it moving on its own. That was pretty terrifying, and I couldn't help but scream as the car raced out of my control down the road on its own. After what felt like an eternity, the car finally came to a stop. We were both shaking with fear, unsure if we had just experienced something supernatural, or if it was all in our minds. As we drove away from Clinton Road, the car once again under our power, we couldn't help but feel a sense of relief. But the memory of that night still haunts us to this day. We never did get to see a ghost, but we witnessed something far more terrifying than we ever could have imagined. A Scary Lover's Lane story. I always loved the woods behind my childhood home. It was a sprawling landscape of towering trees, tangled underbrush, and twisting trails that seemed to stretch on forever. I knew every inch of the forest like the back of my hand, and I would often explore its secrets in the early hours of the morning, when the world was still and silent. But tonight was different. I didn't come here to explore or to play. I came here with my boyfriend Ryan to find some privacy. As we walked deeper into the woods, holding hands and giggling, like the two lovesick teenagers we were, I couldn't help but feel a shiver down my spine. It was a strange feeling, like the woods were alive, and they were watching us. We found a small clearing near the center of the forest, and we set up our picnic basket in the grass. Ryan brought a bottle of wine, and we poured ourselves glasses as we lay down, cuddling close to one another, gazing up at the stars. It was perfect, peaceful, serene, romantic. But as the night wore on, the moon crept higher in the sky, and the sounds of the woods changed. It started with a rustling in the trees, followed by the whisper of leaves on the ground. I could hear the faint crunch of twigs, and the ominous growling of some unseen animal. Ryan noticed it too, and we both sat up, huddled together in fear. And that's when we saw it, lurking on the edge of the clearing. A figure emerged from the darkness. It was tall, impossibly thin, with pale ghostly skin that seemed to glow in the darkness. Its eyes were hollow black pits, and its mouth was twisted into an unnatural grin. I couldn't move. I couldn't scream. I was frozen in terror as that creature approached us, its arms outstretched, reaching for us. We ran from there, this skinny, dead-looking thing staggering behind us. Trying to catch up, we got in the car as it entered the parking lot and headed toward us. My boyfriend gunned the engine and drove directly at that creature, intending to run it down. And then it was gone, vanished into thin air, leaving us alone in the cold, dark, and silent parking lot. Ryan and I never spoke of that night again. We tried to pretend it never happened, but we both know that it did. And for years afterward, every time I stepped foot in those woods, I couldn't help but feel a chill run down my spine. The forest was haunted, and we had awakened something that we never should have. That thing that happened to Grandpa. I was with my family, sitting in the living room, visiting my grandfather on his farm. It was a particularly dark and stormy evening. Me and the fam were sitting on the couch, talking about old times and sipping hot cocoa, when all of a sudden, I heard Grandpa call out to me from outside. "Tom, come quick, I need your help," he cried. I quickly got up and rushed outside, but as soon as I stepped out of the door, I realized something was wrong. The wind howled around me, and the rain pelted me in the face as I called out to my grandpa. But there was no answer. I started to walk, and every step I took felt like an eternity. The darkness seemed to be closing in around me, and I could barely see where I was going. I heard my grandpa call out to me again. I followed the sound of his voice, convinced that he was in trouble. I called out to him, and I ran toward the direction of his voice. I turned a corner, and I could hear him right there, but there was still no sign of my grandpa. Suddenly, something brushed past me, making me jump. I whipped around, but there was nothing there. The only thing that remained was the faint sound of my grandpa's voice, which seemed to be coming from the dark woods in the distance. I started to run toward the woods, but as I drew closer, I could sense that something was amiss. And as I entered those woods, I began to shiver uncontrollably. I could hear sticks snapping and leaves crunching, but there was no sign of my grandpa. My heart was pounding in my chest, and I felt something cold and slimy slither across my neck. I jumped and spun around, but again there was nothing to be seen. It was like the woods had come alive and were closing in around me. The sound of my grandpa's voice was still coming from a distance, but there was no way to tell where he was. The woods were like a twisted maze that seemed to go on forever and ever. As I continued to search for my grandpa in the woods, I realized that I had become completely and utterly lost. The rain was coming down hard, and lightning flashed intermittently, illuminating the dense foliage all around. I called out for my grandpa one more time, but there was no response. Suddenly, as if from nowhere, I heard a rustling in the bushes behind me. I spun around to face it, knowing deep down that it was not my grandpa's voice. A cold, hollow laughter filled the woods, and I felt something reaching out to grab me from behind. I gasped as I felt a cold, skeletal hand clutch onto my shoulder. Turning around to face my fear, I saw the skeletal form of my grandfather leering at me with a rictus grin. I tried to scream, but nothing came out, and before my eyes, the skeletal form of my grandpa evaporated. into the dark woods, leaving me alone and lost, with the sound of his laughter following me. The hole in the basement floor. I had just returned from my week-long vacation, and I was eager to get back to my regular routine. However, upon entering my home, something immediately felt off. It was as if a dark cloud had settled over the place, and a chill ran down my spine. As I made my way to the basement to grab some tools, I noticed something strange. My eyes fell upon a freshly filled-in rectangular hole in the middle of my basement floor. I had never seen it before, and I knew something was incredibly wrong. My heart pounding in my chest, I tentatively approached the hole and peered down at it. The dirt was not still. It was trembling somehow. Something was moving down there under the ground, and that realization made me break out into a cold sweat. Whatever it was trying to break free from that dirt, and I could hear low growling coming from below. I felt a sudden sense of intense fear, as if something was watching me. I spun around, but there was no one in sight. Then, suddenly, something burst from the hole. It was like a sinister apparition rising from the depths of the earth. It was hideous, with glowing red eyes and gnarled, claw-like hands that reached for me. I stumbled backward into a stack of boxes, my heart beating 100 miles a minute. I tried to scream, to run, to do anything to escape the horror before me. But I was frozen in place, paralyzed with fear. The thing cackled, a high-pitched and malevolent sound that filled the basement. It spoke in a voice that chilled me to the core, promising me horrors beyond imagining. Determined to survive, I raced back up the stairs, trying to leave that unholy thing behind me. But it pursued me, its claws ripping through the floor as it emerged from the basement. I ran out in front of my home, causing a neighbor of mine to become concerned. I told him there was an intruder in my house, one who had buried himself in a grave in my basement. My neighbor looked at me as if I needed a psychiatrist, but he called the police for me anyway, when I asked him to. After the cops searched the grounds, they brought me down to the basement and asked me to show them where the floor had been dug up. I was stunned to find the dirt floor in that basement entirely undisturbed. The police did not put me on the kook list or the crank list, but they did send a team around for a wellness check on me later that day. And they convinced me to go see a government shrink, which I advise none of you to ever do. Since that day, I just tell shrinks what they want to hear, and I tell everyone else the truth. I still don't know what was in my basement that day, but I know I didn't imagine it, and I know that I'm not crazy. The invisible critic. I can't shake the feeling that someone else is in my house. Every night I hear a woman's voice, whispering something in an annoyed fashion, and usually I can't quite make it out. It sounds like she's talking about me, but I can rarely tell what she's saying. It's strange, and it's more than a little unnerving. But what's even stranger is that every time I can make out what the voice is saying, she does seem to be talking about what I'm wearing. One night I was wearing my old brown robe when I heard her whisper, "That robe is so old and threadbare. You really should get a new one." Another night I had my favorite cardigan on, and I heard her say, "That cardigan has seen better days. You need a new one." At first I tried to brush it off and tell myself it was just my imagination playing tricks on me. But the more I heard the voice, the more convinced I became that there was actually someone in my house. I started to get scared and paranoid, always keeping an eye out for any sign of an intruder. And then one night, The voice spoke directly to me. I was sitting in my armchair reading a book when I heard her say, "Your slippers are looking pretty shabby these days. Why don't you throw them out and get some new ones?" I froze, feeling a chill run down my spine. It was like the woman was standing right behind me, speaking directly into my ear. Slowly, I turned my head, hoping to catch a glimpse of whoever that was speaking to me. But when I looked around, there was no one there. I got up from my chair and I frantically searched the entire house, but there was no sign of anyone. I was completely alone. But I couldn't shake the feeling that there was someone there, watching me. To this day, I can't bear to be in my home alone. I started staying with my daughter and her family, afraid to even set foot in my own house. The voice still speaks to me sometimes, but I try to ignore it as best I can. I don't recognize the voice as being anyone I used to know or anything like that. It's not like it's the ghost of my mother or my ex-wife or anything, so I don't understand her concern with my wardrobe. I don't know who she is, and I don't know what she wants from me. And, I admit, I'm terrified to find the answers to any of these questions. What'll you give me? I woke up with a start and felt the heavy weight of confusion gripping my mind. I was in complete darkness, unable to see anything. Where was I? How did I end up here? My heart pounded with fear as I tried to recall the events that led me to this claustrophobic space, but my memory was blank. As if sensing my bewilderment, a raspy voice whispered in the darkness, "What'll you give me?" The voice was deep and chilling, sending shivers down my spine. I tried to respond, but my words seemed to stick in my throat. I had no clue what this voice wanted from me, or who it belonged to. I struggled to rise up, but something was holding me down. I fumbled in the darkness, and I felt cold metal shackles around my wrists. My heart raced, and my mind was ablaze with fear and confusion. Was I kidnapped? Was I in a dungeon? The voice spoke again, sounding impatient and menacing. "What'll you give me?" This time I could sense a note of eagerness in his tone, as if he was waiting for something. My mind was racing to find an answer, but all I could think of was getting out of there alive. What did this voice want from me? And why was I here? Suddenly I felt a cold breeze on my neck and a putrid odor filled my nostrils. I gasped in terror, and I tried to move away, but the chains held me in place. I felt a hand on my shoulder, and the voice spoke again, scraping my ear with its words. "You're not going anywhere, my dear. Not until you give me what I want." Suddenly the darkness was shattered by a blinding light, and I could see the face of my captor. He was grotesque, his eyes glowing with a demonic light. I tried to scream, but my voice was drowned by his laughter. The world faded into darkness again, and I was left alone with his voice, asking me the same question over and over again. "What'll you give me?" The talking plant being. I woke up to a startling sight, a glowing plant-like humanoid standing at the foot of my bed. At first I thought it was some sort of a dream or hallucination, but as I rubbed the sleep from my eyes, the creature remained there, its unearthly glow illuminating my room. I mustered the courage to ask, "What are you?" to which the creature replied, in a garbled language that I couldn't understand. It repeated its words, gradually slowing down until I could make out that it claimed to be a distant relative of a flowering earth plant. This revelation sent a chill through me, as I couldn't wrap my mind around the concept of a plant being able to communicate and exist as a humanoid creature. I nervously asked, "What do you want from me?" The creature responded, "My species is dying, and we need your help to survive." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This glowing plant-like creature was asking for my help? Before I could grasp the situation, the creature reached out and took my hand. Suddenly I was flooded with a vision of a barren wasteland, a world where all plant life had been decimated. The alien creature told me that their planet was once like Earth, full of lush and green forests and flourishing plant life, but due to a catastrophic event, all life was wiped out, except for his one lone species. They had been searching for a way to survive and reproduce ever since, and they believed that the DNA of flowering plants on Earth was their last and only hope. I was dumbfounded, but moved by the creature's plea for help. The alien's hand began to glow, and as it did, I felt my body infused with a strange energy. The alien explained that they had transferred some of their genetic material to me, making me a part of their species and connecting me directly to their desperate plight to survive. As the creature disappeared back into the darkness, I was left alone with a newfound sense of responsibility. I had been chosen to help the alien plant species survive, and if I didn't, their fate would be sealed. The thought of being the only hope for another species is both daunting and terrifying, but I know I have to try, and yet I also realize that I have no idea how to help, or what I can do that would help. I can't get anyone to take me seriously about the situation, and being known as the plant guy has cost me a promotion at my job. If this species truly needs my help, they're going to have to tell me how I can help. Right now, I've lost a lot of credibility, and I sort of need to concern myself with helping me, not some alien species. I wish that creature had never entered my bedroom. There was a gnome in our front closet. I must admit, I never believed in fairy tales or mythical creatures. That was, until the day I saw that weird freaking gnome with my own eyes. It was a quiet afternoon, and I was busy in the living room, knitting away, when I heard the sound of the front door unlocking. It was my husband John returning from work. He was always punctual, which was a blessing, but this time his return was far from ordinary. As he walked in, I saw his expression changed as he moved toward the front closet. I couldn't hear anything unusual, but then all of a sudden, a 10-inch tall white-bearded gnome ran out of that closet and right past both of us, straight out the front door. I was in shock. I rubbed my eyes, thinking it was some sort of hallucination. But when I saw John's expression of pure shock and disbelief, I knew that my mind wasn't playing tricks on me. It was real. There, in the front room of our home, we had witnessed something that most people will never see in their entire lives. We both ran outside trying to see the gnome again, but wherever it had run off to, it was gone. We couldn't see it any place, but we stood there for a while looking around anyway. It seemed to have been waiting for someone to open the front door so he could make a break for it. The creature must have sneaked into our house, and then not have been able to figure out how to get back out. At least, that seemed to make sense to us, based on the way it ran out the door as John came in. I wonder how long it had been trapped inside, and I wonder where it ran off to. From that day on, I couldn't stop thinking about the strange creature that had appeared before us. Was it a sign? If so, was it a good omen or a bad one? And most importantly, why did it come into our home? And then where did it go? Years later, I still have no answers, but I will forever remember that moment in time when I saw something truly magical and unexplainable. It's a moment that I will take with me to the grave. I woke up a different person
I woke up this morning feeling groggy, disoriented, and confused. But soon enough, my confusion turned to fear and anxiety when I realized something wasn't right. For starters, my wife was not next to me. She was gone, as if she had never existed. And when I tried to search for her, I noticed something peculiar. I was in a completely unfamiliar place. None of the furniture, decor, or even the structure of the house matched my own. And what's even stranger was that my parents, who should be retired in their home state, were sitting in the living room, acting like nothing was out of the ordinary. As I tried to make sense of my surroundings, I noticed something else that was off. Everyone was calling me by a different name. It wasn't my own name, and it wasn't even a name I recognized. It was as if a different person had taken over my body somehow. But the confusion didn't end there. When I called my brother on the phone, I was greeted by a woman I didn't recognize. She turned out to be a sister that I didn't used to have, and I wanted to scream in horror. As the day went by, weirder and weirder events occurred. Total strangers acted as if they knew me, despite me having no memory of them at all. And as I tried to convince them of who I really was, everyone just seemed to brush it off like I was joking. They didn't believe that I was who I am. They believed I was this other guy, with a different name and a different life. That entire day was a living nightmare. I felt like I was trapped in a twisted version of my own reality, where everything was the opposite of what it should be. By the end of the day, I was barely holding on to my sanity. I don't know what happened to me or why, but one thing is for sure. I want to go back to my old life, and I want to go as soon as possible, before this eerie and spooky new world becomes my new reality. I saw my own doppelganger. I had been going for early morning jogs for a while now, but this was definitely the first time I had ever felt uneasy at this time of day. The narrow jogging path was situated deep within a forest, and the only source of illumination was the dim glow of the full moon peeking through the trees. I had been jogging for a while, but something felt off. Perhaps it had something to do with the eerie silence, or the distant howling of wolves echoing through the woods. I tried to shake it off, but the feeling of unease only grew stronger as I ran. That's when I saw it, a figure slowly jogging toward me. It took me a couple of seconds to realize what was wrong. The closer this person got, the more I realized that their face was an exact copy of mine. My heartbeat quickened, and I started to slow down. The figure kept closing in on me, and the more I saw of their appearance, the more unsettled I became. Their hair was unkempt, and their eyes looked crazy. But other than that, they were me. They wore the exact same running gear, down to the color of their shoes. It wasn't long before we were facing each other, and my unease turned into full-blown horror at the sight of my doppelganger staring right back at me. We just stood there, staring into each other's eyes, for what felt like an eternity. I didn't know what to do or say, and my words failed me. And then, without saying a word, they turned around and started jogging away, leaving me there, alone with the knowledge that something deeply wrong had just happened. I couldn't shake off the feeling of unease and dread that clung to me, and all I could do was run back home, knowing that I wasn't alone on that dark and twisted jogging trail. Hell got too full. I was sitting on the couch, scrolling through my phone, when our doorbell rang. We weren't expecting anyone, so I was surprised to see 2 police officers standing on our doorstep. They asked to speak to my parents, and seemed hesitant to say why they were there. But eventually they explained that there had been some unusual activity in the area, and that they wanted to make sure our whole family would be home that evening. I couldn't help but feel a sense of unease settling over me, and when my parents got back and tried to reassure me that everything was okay, It didn't make me feel any better. We decided to spend the evening watching movies and eating popcorn, trying to forget about the strange visit from the police. But as night fell, and the streetlights flickered on, my anxiety only grew. I just couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I suggested that maybe we should hop in our car and leave just in case, but my parents thought that was unnecessary. "We'll be fine," they said reassuringly. "The police know what they're doing." But it wasn't until we heard strange noises coming from the cemetery down the street that we realized maybe we should have listened to my suggestion. At first, we thought it was just the wind, but then we saw something emerging from the graves. The first thing I saw was a creature I'd never seen before, with eyes that glowed red, and a body that looked like it was once human. I wanted to scream and run, but I was rooted to the spot, too scared to move. Then, one by one, more of them started to rise from their graves, their once dead bodies coming to life once again. The house was surrounded. My mother pointed out the window to the street, and when I looked where she was pointing, I saw those two officers sitting inside their police cruiser, watching the entire situation, and apparently laughing about it. They wanted to know that we would be home, so they could watch what happened when the cemetery unloaded its cargo out onto the streets. But how had they known this would happen? We huddled together, watching in horror as the dead gathered around us. There was no escape. We were trapped in a nightmare that we never could have imagined. It lasted until morning, too, by which time the dead had either returned to their graves or had moved on somewhere else. We didn't spend time wondering about it, though. We just packed what we could in the car and got out of there while the getting was good. I, for one, will never go back in that town. In fact, I won't even utter the name of that town ever again. If you hate the worst and you love the best, then you're gonna love our CS. Please join me in thanking tonight's executive producer, CS, for making this episode possible. CS gets all our perks, and if you want them too, then listen to what our international TV spokesmongrel Henry Lee Dogman has to say. Hank? Thanks, Biggie. And thanks to all of you for watching this far. If you liked it, please click like. If you'd like to see more of our work, please subscribe. And also click that bell icon if you'd like to be notified when we put out a new episode. To become an executive producer, you can donate to us through the thanks button under each of our videos, or through our paypal.me/PeterBernard209 page. To receive cool perks like secret uncensored Dogman episodes far too wild to ever run on this channel, you can become a YouTube channel member by clicking the join button, or join our PayPal subscribers club at peterbernard.com. Joining either at the $3 a month level or above gets you access to our over 25 hours of secret uncensored Dogman stories available nowhere else. Do you have a scary story about Dogman or some other kind of high strangeness that happened to you? Let us know by emailing us at scarystoriesnyc@gmail.com or by leaving us a voicemail message at 804-LA-SCARY. You may need to call back on that one. It cuts off after, I think, 3 minutes. And if you don't want to do any of that stuff, thank you for simply watching to the end. Good night, and have a scary tomorrow.
Come back for more scary stories.